Welcome to the Branding Laboratory, where we explore the art and science of branding. I'm your host, Deevo Tyndall, brand strategist, storyteller, and master photographer. Join us as we dive deep into the captivating stories, expert insights, and practical tips to help you elevate your brand and connect deeply with your audience. Let's get started. So today we have the pleasure of speaking with Rick Berry. He is an accomplished entrepreneur, CEO, mentor, and author. By the way, man, some cool stuff you've put together on that. You're known as the business guy and the anti-guru. I want to explore that a little bit with you. And you have a really remarkable story going back to roughly, from what I can tell on my, I stalked you quite a bit to prepare for the show, 2002. So I really love to hear your origin story and how you got started there. I am going to talk a little bit about some things along your entrepreneurial journey and how you develop this unique brand that you're working on right now. I want to dive into a little bit of some of your pivotal moments in your career, share that with my audience, and learn your leadership and your creative style and how you made jumps. And as I talk about with my team often, it's funny, we think we're going on a straight line, but it's the squiggly and back and forth and a zigzag and all that sort of stuff. And oh, sorry, forgive me. I called you Rick. I don't know why I had you listed as Rick, but forgive me. It's Nick.
My first name is Richard. In your defense.
That's why. So I picked it up from your book or something, maybe?
I don't know. I get it all the time. So it's my parents' fault.
All right. I apologize. Nick.
No worries.
Sorry. So for all of you listening, way to go, Deevo, getting prepped on your guest. But nonetheless, we do have Nick on the show. One of the things I want to talk about is your fitness revolution and your philanthropy. You're doing a bunch of philanthropy around that stuff. And did I see you raised $1.1 million for various charities? What the hell, bro? That's amazing.
Yeah.
I want to dive into some of your financial strategies and some of the stuff that you talked about in your book, The Only Business Book You'll Ever Need. You went into that direction. I always love insights on finances, so anything you can share with that. And then you have a new podcast called The Business Owner's Journey, which we're going to talk a little bit about. So it's going to be a good show. And then at the end of it, Nick, we're going to put you in the hot seat. So I have some very specific questions, just put you on the hot seat and see how you handle under fire, some questions. And that's pretty much it. It's going to be hopefully an insightful and engaging conversation. And I'm excited that you're here. Let's tell some stories. So my first piece of interest for everyone I have on my show is I like to understand some of your background and your motivations for the journey that you went on. I started off in the corporate world, got fed up with the nonsense in that space. So I jumped ship and went entrepreneurial. Sounds like you have a similar story.
Good for you, man.
So can you share some of your origin story? What inspired you to head into the entrepreneurial world? I think 2002 is your beginning, right?
Yeah. In hindsight, it looks like it was all done intentionally, but it was far from that. I graduated college. I was pretty aimless, didn't really have a plan for myself. I got a job as a personal trainer and I was a bad personal trainer. I was a terrible employee. I think I lasted like 6 months and it was probably 5 months too long. But the thing that I took from it was like, I'm not meant to work for somebody else. I'm going to have to like make my own way. And so that's really when the light bulb came on. Like, I still have no idea what I'm going to do, but I'm going to have to do it for myself. And I fumbled around and got into a few things. And being in fitness was also an accident. It wasn't something that I was necessarily drawn to. I just fell into it and then started. So from there, I started a personal training business and bought a Smoothie King pro shop inside of a box club and opened a couple of those, opened a personal training business, and actually then opened an Anytime Fitness. I think we were like the 33rd Anytime Fitness ever. Yeah. So this is we're talking about. There was no CrossFit then. This is 2002, 3, 4, something like that. Anytime Fitness was not Anytime Fitness. But
that was a franchise concept, Anytime Fitness?
Yeah. So it's Anytime Fitness. That's the 24-hour clubs that there are 10,000 of them around the world.
Yeah. Remind me to tell you, I have a funny story about Anytime Fitness back when I was in college.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Anytime Fitness. Anytime there is a funny story involving a 24-hour key club. Yeah. We'll do that off the air. Mm-hmm. But so where there was the inflection point where the catalyst in all of that was because there were a lot of things I was just fumbling around.
Yeah.
But we were like, it was pre-CrossFit. There were CrossFits, but there were like 10 of them. It was still a concept. Training gyms was, I wouldn't even say that it was like emerging. It wasn't even nascent yet. But with our personal training, we came up with a few concepts that we were pulling from other businesses that really started to take off, and we started to make good money with a personal training business, not delivering the training, but having a team of trainers in a gym. And this is back when personal training was being sold 10 packs, 30, 20 packs, 30 packs, all that stuff. We started doing annual agreements, doing EFT, like auto debits,
Yep. Yep.
and group training. And those were like three big levers that nobody was doing then. So it was like, it gave us leverage in the business, and the business really took off. But then when we're talking to other people in our industry, they're like, hey, that sounds incredible. The numbers you guys are doing are incredible. And they were. So we'll pay you to tell us how to do that. Then I was a consultant. And that's when it took off and turned into, we started doing information products, courses, mastermind programs. Ultimately, it became a franchise. We rolled out 2 franchise systems. And then it evolved into a business coaching firm that it still exists, Fitness Revolution, where we deliver business coaching. We have our own curriculum for gym owners and personal trainers.
Were those when you picked up the nicknames, the business guru and the anti-guru? Is that sort of where that stuff came in?
So it was, the business guy was like, even today, and I'm not knocking on fitness people, but if you go to a fitness event, even if it's a fitness business event, like, you're going to see a lot of spandex, a lot of tank tops. And so we knew, but that's not our angle. We're here to talk about how they can make more money doing this thing. So it was wearing khakis, and I dressed better than I probably would dress now.
Mm.
But so then it was like the business guy, the system guys. And so that stuck. And the anti-guru, just been doing this for a long time, and can be like rough around the edges or curmudgeonly about, there's just a lot of noise and ickiness, and so I just will rail on that, on the gurus and the experts a little bit. And so the anti-guru is just a tongue-in-cheek thing that's come about.
The anti-guru thing really resonated with me when I first encountered it, because one of the things that I have the biggest problem with, and this goes back to my corporate days, is the idea of this self-importance on how big of a deal that some of the people that I worked with in the corporate world thought they actually were. And I used to think, man, like, you're just a number. No matter what you are, whether you're an SVP, an EVP, like, nobody cares. They can slice and dice you any way they want, and as soon as they're done with you, you're gone. But people always took themselves so important in their roles they had, and I always wondered. It's one of the things that drove me away from the corporate world. Is, dude, we're here as a team. Like, I literally was reprimanded early in my career because I had an idea, and I didn't move it up the chain to my superiors. And I went straight to like the person who ran the division. And I was like, hey man, I have this really cool idea. It can improve efficiencies. It'll save X. I did this whole background check on it to make this project sellable. And he's like, man, this is a great idea, but I have to tell you, this is not the forum. You have to and I got admonished for it. And I just remember thinking, bro, I do work for you, but this is a company, and I just came with you to a brilliant idea, and you had to put politics involved in this. It never made any sense to me. So the anti-guru piece was really cool to me. And then you look at today's social media world, and it's everyone is an expert. And I just had the idea around, people must be really confused. If you're not an expert and you're just looking for an expert and trying to find some information, people must be really overwhelmed, because there's so many people go on Instagram, go on LinkedIn. Everyone's offering the next big fix, the next $1 million payout. And I'm just like, how do consumers sort out the bullshit? What's your take on that? Like, how do you define, I call myself a personal branding master expert, and I'm pretty fucking good at what I do, but there's probably people way better than me at that. So how do you as a consumer sort through all that bullshit and find the right person for you?
Man, I think that's such a neat topic, because I don't have the answer. I think so if you've looked much at my social media, I think my social media sucks, because I've always had such a hard time with bringing my real personality there. I was around, being the social media presence was not part of my responsibility in any of our companies. So when it came time for me to surface my personal brand, I was basically just doing what I'd seen done.
Mm,
What I've seen is what you just described, and it's garbage, right? It's
mm,
all this shit that's out there that it's you get the absolute best version, the most grandiose image of self-importance that everybody is willing to share. And so it makes it really hard to come out and be authentic.
mhm.
And I've just in the last 6 months started to go back to social media. I don't enjoy it at all, but I think it's important. And I've started working with someone to just help me sift through and bring authenticity to it.
Yeah.
Like get back to, I'm just going to put the stuff out there that's like really me, and I'm not, and let the rest of the world be what it is.
Yeah.
I don't have the answer for like how you're supposed to filter through it. You see it for what it is as best you can.
Yeah, no, it's a wonderful question. I myself have toiled with it, and I've been on social media for a while now. Instagram is my sandbox that I play in, and I don't know that I figured it out or not figured it out, but I do generate about 30% of my revenue now from Instagram. And one of the things that I'm super proud about is that I've never focused on likes, I've never focused on followers. I've focused on providing value on a
Mhm.
regular basis, being transparent. The word authentic is overly used, in my opinion, but genuinely speaking, people don't really care about what you're selling. They want to know who the person is and why you do what you do. And so I've always found that by just showing up and talking about things that work for me, things that didn't work for me, and being honest and candid with my audience, and I have a decent audience on Instagram, I've found a lot of resonance with my audience. And I did a post yesterday. I've never jumped on, and I fucking hate it, the collective consciousness of jumping on the bandwagon because it's trendy. And I never understood whether it's the ice bucket challenge from years ago or doing these stupid TikTok dances. Dude, true story. I'm in Mexico recently and I'm sitting on a beach, and I sometimes I can't even make this shit up. And there are two influencers, which I hate that term. I'm glad influencers are dying out, by the way. There are two women barely clothed, and they're taking turns filming each other, and they're like doing just like nonsensical dances and just stupid things. But for whatever reason, they got in an argument, and they didn't like, one girl was trying to over direct and the other girl didn't like the direction she was taking, so then they were swapping back and forth. So they're like, okay, you could see them get in a fight, and I'm just sitting here watching, just they don't even know I'm there. I'm just like creeping on them. They were scantily clad. To my credit, I did enjoy the view for a while. But then they separated and they both went their own separate way. And one girl's propping up a camera on the beach and she's like setting up her own little scene and she starts to film it. And then the other girl, I look over and she's doing the same thing. And for whatever reason, they got annoyed with each other and themselves. And then they just stormed off and walked off. And I just remember thinking, the stuff that they were doing, I'm like, who's actually watching this and thinking, wow, I'm getting value from that? And so my first comment was, where did we go as a society where that adds value? Because like I'm putting out intellectual thought seed on my Instagram or my LinkedIn, and then two people will comment on it. And then I'll see someone else posting this nonsensical thing and there's a million people following. And I'm like, where did we go wrong as a society where critical thinking and intellectual thought seed and real value is no longer a priority? And so I was like, fuck it, I don't care. I'm just going to keep doing what I do. I'm just going to keep talking about the things that work. Anyway, it works for me. Like, so if you ever want to have a conversation about that, happy to share with you some insights that I've found. But I want to talk about you. You've had a lot of success in this fitness world, and especially with Fitness Revolution. And there is a lot of people doing exactly what you do. So I'm curious how you found, literally, I go to my gym on a daily basis and there's 15 different people doing private fitness coaching. So it's like, how did you find the ideas, the creativity to start these new business models, if you will, that you talked about, the annual memberships and using EFT, et cetera? That, what was some of your marquee pivotal moments as you built that separated you from other people?
So I think those things originally, those were tactics that just because it was just such a raw green profession that it was just there were so many things that needed to be done and just needed to be like brought into the next generation. I think where we and that was probably accidental, maybe just by nature. I tend to look to the left and look to the right and see what are things that are other people are doing that could be applied. I recognize patterns, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But where the best example, I think, of what you just described came probably 10 years later, maybe like about 2015, where we brought strategic planning into our coaching and our curriculum, built our curriculum around it. Because at that point, like so our industry, the fitness professionals, personal trainers, these businesses, they'd evolved, they'd gotten better at executing tactics, but there was still no strategy being brought. And so we started to focus on, let's teach them how to create strategy, like a true business strategy for themselves, and put that into play, and then watch what happens to these people they've learned these simple, like I was going to say simple movements, making a like a fitness comparison, but like the tactical activities. Let's teach them how to like start rolling those up into bundles, into something bigger, a bigger strategy, and put that into play, and see what happens.
What I
And
love what I love about what you just said is you looked at it from the user's perspective and how could you benefit, how could they benefit rather than this is my idea and I'm just going to stick to it. And I find that when I work with a lot of entrepreneurs, they're wondering why people are not latching onto their product. And what eventually turns out in some situations is they're not looking at it from their end user's perspective. What is in it for them, not in it for you? Does that make sense? So I loved how you made that reverse engineer and said, okay, how can my constituents, my buyers most benefit from this, right? And so a lot of entrepreneurs make that reverse mistake, isn't it? So it's phenomenal for you.
Yeah, I'm probably more of a product oriented perspective, but if you dig into that, I guess I'm fortunate. I'm a problem solver, but really I'm a good problem diagnoser. And so that keeps you focused on like the customer, the problem that they need solved. And then I don't fall in love too much with my product. I'm willing to mold it, but I'm going to stay honed in on what's the problem that needs to be solved.
Dude, it's kudos to you for being able to recognize that. Again, not to harp on it, but that's one of the things I see most in early entrepreneurs, especially with some of the individuals that I'm working with, is they're so vested in their product, this grand, juicy, audacious idea that they have. And it's a really good idea, but they're not looking at what problem does this solve for my ideal buyer. Instead, this is the problem that I want to solve for me. So it's great that you had that. I want to switch gears, if I may. Before I do that, you said something about strategy. It's really critical, isn't it? Whether you're creating a product, whether you're running a business, whether it's an e-commerce store or the coaching business, to have a purpose in mind. Like, what's the end game behind this? And then how do we fill in those different buckets to fill that? It's really important, that strategy piece. I really love the piece on your, what was it called? Revolution for a Cause. Is that your philanthropy? Did I see you raise $1.1 million for that?
Yeah.
That's bravo. So what kind of tell me where was your impetus behind this? Why'd you get into this space? Where's the money going? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, the program itself is one we've been running for close to 10 years. And it started out, we have all these clients, these gym owners, personal trainers, people who are in our coaching programs who, a lot of them independently, and they are mostly independent. Some of them are franchisees of other systems, but primarily they are independent, and we are the hub of their network. And so they would be doing the various charity drives over the course of the year. And so we just started putting together these programs where we would coordinate with them and launch it. If another franchise system was going to do a charity drive across all of their units, we did the same thing. We just were doing it with a bunch of independent businesses. And so we would coordinate all of their efforts, and those who chose to participate did, and those who did not. And we just kept track of the funds that were raised, the time that was donated. And they were all able to, we had a charity that we would designate that we would contribute to, and it changed from time to time, but we also would allow them, if they were doing their drive as a part of our program, they're welcome to do it for whatever charity they chose. So it ended up feeding like money into a lot of different charities. But I think what was powerful about it was we were able to give opportunities for businesses who were not going to do it otherwise to just plug and play. We give them a blueprint, right?
Mm.
This is what everybody else is doing. This is people like you are doing it. It works. So you can go out and you don't have to come up with a way to do this on your own if you don't want to.
Yeah. It's like a franchise model. You're the Dr. Dre of the fitness world.
Okay.
I was reading about Dr. Dre the other day, and his music was his namesake, right? He got started similar to you, but he's got 40 artists under his label. And then in addition to the 40 artists, he's got all these multiple production companies. And so his whole business model centers around bringing other artists up that he recognizes as raw talent, putting them into his franchise system, if you will, promoting them. But then, of course, he takes a cut of everything. And so it's like, that's what you're doing right here, it sounds like. I
Yeah,
love that.
that's a lot of the story that we've talked about was the chapter that I've spent in fitness. And we ramped up and we were a franchisor. We had a franchise system for a while. Then we chose to unwind that and just deliver it as a coaching program and a license because we didn't want to impose the restrictions that come along with the franchising. It was just,
Mm.
we were working with a lot of independent people. They wanted to keep that. That's cool. To go back to what you're saying about Dr. Dre. So that is what I have evolved to now, where like fitness is one of the businesses that I have. Most of the businesses that I have now are similar in that, like, I work with business leaders, right? So I have my portfolio of companies that I work with. We have an operator in each one. So that's essentially like my organizational leadership team. And like, you work with people on developing their brand, either for their business or themselves. I work with people on becoming a better business owner,
Mm.
right? So that's the methodology that I've pulled together over time has been, how do I take someone who is an up and comer, who has this vision for themselves, and wants to figure out, how do I get there?
Hmm.
How do I like empower them, help them acquire the skills and the tools over time? And so that's,
Dr. Berry, that's your new name.
I'll take that. That's
I
probably the only way that I'm going to get doctor.
That's going to be your personal brand name. Your story and mine are very similar in that regard because I saw a void with early entrepreneurs in my business and all the mistakes that I had made and all the different things that I didn't strategize on or the different things that I didn't promote myself on, waiting too almost too late to get on social media because I had imposter syndrome and things of that nature. And so I saw the void between people, especially in the photography world or the creative world, people are passionate about their craft, but they hadn't taken the time to get the business acumen and understand the foundational brand of what they represented. What problems do they solve? Who are they serving? How are they getting that message out there to a larger audience, et cetera? They just had this great idea and they're like, I'm going straight to marketing. I'm going straight to social media. And then they fizzle out and wondered why they fizzle out. And I was like, what do you stand for? Who are you selling to? Who is your audience and what problems do you solve? And most of them just didn't have any clarity on that. And so that's how I built my whole business, is like helping people get clarity and crystallize that message. So we got to partner up. We've got a couple of different synergies that we could collaborate on.
Absolutely.
One of the things that my next question I really loved about you is your acumen around financial success and how important it is to have this sort of in your business book, the only business book you ever made, I think it was, you talked about the importance of financial management. And I hired a photographer recently and she's fresh out of school and she's really talented and she's just a lovely young woman. But she has no idea how to run a business, like literally no clue whatsoever. She hadn't set up any sort of budgeting system. She's got no QuickBooks. She's got no accounting. Like she has no idea. I just want to take photos. And I'm like, okay, so great. So once you take photos, like how are you going to manage the money? What's your budget? All these different things. And so it's really important. And I hope you can speak to it for a second. Of all of the critical skills you develop, whether you're a new business owner or an experienced business owner, the element of understanding your financial metrics and how to manage your business financially. Can you speak a little bit to that?
Yeah. So what I've learned is, actually, it's probably better to just reframe it and let's just throw financial out and let's just talk about keeping score.
Mm-hmm.
Because we're going to apply that to the finances, and we'll apply that to all the other KPIs too. But you've got to, and I don't want anybody to hear the word financials and shut down. Like, that makes my job harder if I'm trying to help them like embrace this stuff. So don't worry about the financials. Let's just talk about keeping score. How are we going to keep score? And we're going to need to keep score in a few different areas. We're going to need to, we need to know how we're doing all the time, and how are we going to know how we're doing? The bottom line is going to be money. Is this thing, the economics, does that work here? We're going to have some measure of financial success, but we're also going to have some other measures, ways to keep score that are going to help us determine whether or not we're on track to be financially successful before we get there. So the leading indicators, are we doing the things that now that should get us enough leads or start enough conversations that should then give us enough opportunities to make sales, that should then give us enough opportunities to retain clients, and just simplify it down. If you want to hone in on the financial aspect and the things that you do need to keep score of, make sure that you understand how your cash works. Are you cash flow positive in a period or not? Are you
So looking at trends in your data, so to speak.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, so worry about cash flow, and then if you're just starting out, now I'm speaking try to speak to the most fundamental level, positive cash flow, and then I would start to worry more about the leading indicators. What's your sales number? How are you going to know if you're winning or losing in that game? What's your marketing number? How are you going to know if you're winning or losing in that game? And then once you've got a firm grip on those, and that should be a small set of numbers, right? We're talking about between those three groups, 4, 5, 6 numbers. You can get a quick little snapshot, and you should be able to know at any point in time, today, this week, this month, this quarter, how am I doing? If you've got that down cold, then you could start to go deeper into any of those areas. But for somebody who's averse to it, that's the entry point. You just got to get, like, conceptually your arms around, how do I keep score? How do I know how I'm doing? And you can define that in a way that's palatable for you at wherever you're at in your journey.
When you're working with clients, do you have systematized process for this in terms of developing this balanced scorecard, if you will? Financially speaking, when you go in and work with a client, is there analysis involved with it? And then you're systematizing and re-engineering so that they have some metrics to work towards, analyze, et cetera, or is it case by case basis?
So I have a framework that we'll apply, that I'm not going to give them the scorecard. I'm going to teach them how to derive their own scorecard.
Got it.
So they've learned how to fish.
Got it.
And they can adapt as they go. And I spend the majority of my time working with small business owners. And so I feel like I have to meet them more where they're at. Some people are going to be very averse to it. And others are going to be like, this is way too simple. I've got to have a lot more numbers to fill this spreadsheet up. And that's okay. We'll tailor it to wherever they're at.
So your market, you just said something that you primarily work with small business owners, and that was actually what I wrote down. Is your market primarily small business owners, and across a variety of business industries, or do you try to stay focused in that fitness world, so to speak?
It is primarily small business, not so much fitness. I'm the CEO of Fitness Revolution still, but we do have an operator there who is running that business primarily. I'm involved, but not having to be involved in the day-to-day. But as far as a focus, it is across other industries, but it's B2B, primarily services. I don't do much in retail, but yeah, it could be any industry.
I love the direction of where you're going with the financial piece. And I didn't understand that concept. I have to full admission here. Early on in my my entrepreneurial career, I was just, let's just go out and make money. And I didn't take a look at all the different buckets that things go into. And it's funny, you said something earlier in the conversation that kind of piqued my ears. I grew up really poor. And so I had to go through some therapy around this, truthfully speaking. Just be honest with everybody here. I had scarcity around financially making money and not being able to retain money, because I grew up in this concept where my dad always taught us that money was bad. And he had this like warped Christian perspective of money is the root of all evil. And turns out that's not even what the scripture actually said. And so anyhow, I'm going down a different rabbit hole. Please pull me back in. But I had this idea around money that I would make a lot of it, and I'd made a lot of money in the corporate world, but I would spend it really quickly because I never had anything. And so I had to really learn to figure out how to balance those scales and develop my own scorecard. Now I have an operations manager, Melissa, and she comes in and she takes care of all those things for us. So it's been fundamental for our business growth. But I can't stress what you just said, how critical it is for small business owners to have a working grasp of their financial numbers to understand what's coming in, what's going out, and what sort of wiggle room do you have? Which leads me to my next question, because I get this all the time and I want to get your take on it. The idea of spending money to make money. Do you have some sort of like paradigm rules around marketing and budgeting towards that, and being able to spend money on a larger scale so that you can attract a larger audience, make more money, et cetera, develop multiple opportunities? What's your take around that world?
Yeah, I think I don't know if I could turn it into a rule for you, but it just comes down to having a grasp of return on investment, like recognizing the difference in investments and expenses. And it can be, I don't think that's oversimplifying it to start with. You need to be able to justify an expense, whatever money you're going to spend, its relationship to the operation, right? And I think that's what helps mitigate the gray area where we tend to waste so much. We tend to be frivolous with spending. If we can tie it back to a return somehow, just get in the habit of that, then that helps you keep the things reined in. And I think in the case that you're talking about with yourself, where I think that's a really good example, like beliefs can be, man, trying to tame something that you don't even recognize. So that's another animal. I don't think I could give a guideline for something like that. But I think that somebody having the wherewithal like you have to recognize it and go get that addressed, then that's the toughest thing that you're going to fight in finance, right? Everything after that's gravy. You can go and get a framework, do profit first, and it'll be smooth and easy for you. You've already battled your demon.
Dude, the idea, you can't really see it. I actually have my bracelet here, and the word on this bracelet is beliefs. And what I noticed is that in my journey, and again, this journey has been squiggly lines and kickbacks and fallbacks and reverses and falling on your ass and getting back up. I used to think that it was like a straight linear line. I'm going from here to there, and come hell or high water, that's all that's going to happen. But what I realized very early in my entrepreneurial career is like, dude, being an entrepreneur is a motherfucker. Some days it's shit happens that you just never even anticipate. And so what I noticed in that process of the squiggly line is that my beliefs really were put to the test on my own abilities, my own scope management around stuff, my own foundational beliefs on how was I able to handle this? How was I able to work with other people? How could I grow the business? How could I make money? And I had to really reshape everything around what I thought I was and what I thought I brought to the table, especially leaving the corporate world, because you get a paycheck every 2 weeks and it's just, that is what it is. But sometimes it's feast or famine in the entrepreneurial world. But having a strong foundational emotional belief around what you bring to the table, what you're good at, and where you need shadow work was like the biggest shift for me. And so if you could look at your career and the trajectory around who you were when you first started off in 2002 versus where you are today, if you could take a look at some of those demons that you've had to wrestle with in your personal career, what are they and how did you overcome them?
Oh, man.
Sorry,
Well,
loaded question. We went way off the rabbit hole, that one.
It's a great question. And I guess for one thing, I have a hard time saying that I've addressed all of them or that I've won a lot of them, they're just going to be ongoing. Like I may be winning today, but I've got to stay tuned in. I've got to make sure like that demon's not gone.
Totally.
So
it's that squiggly line always comes right back around, doesn't it?
Yeah. So I think it's just making sure that I don't ever feel like it's a check the box, that things are like check the box and move on. You don't get to skip levels. You're going to have to learn from these things, and there are going to be steps backwards, and that's okay. And those things, that doesn't really define me, right? I think it's a great example that you talked about. There's a straight line, and then there's the reality line. Yeah. And man, wouldn't that straight line be boring?
Yeah.
And the reality, this squiggly line is everybody's a squiggly line. Everybody. So if you're looking for some way to measure yourself or a label to put on yourself, like I just had to figure out really early on, like that wasn't going to work for me. Like what everybody else does not matter, right? What matters is what I'm trying to do. Am I doing the things that I know to do to move in the right direction? Like I'm my only basis for comparison. And I don't really know where that came from. And I think that sometimes that might be to the detriment, to my own detriment, but like that's helped keep me sane and keep me focused.
I have a thought on that. I love that you said what everyone else does not matter. It's we get caught up in that comparisonitis, right? Oh, and especially with social media now, and you have so much information at your fingertips, and you can see like right next door somebody's doing this. And first of all, most of that shit is not even real. Okay, so just anyone who's listening, if your entire life is exclusively centered around your social media posts, and if you think that person lives the life of luxury 24/7, bro, go back to the squiggly line anatomy. Trust me, that is not accurate. And I'm not saying that people aren't being successful. I'm just saying that your point you just said, don't base your narrative off a comparison to somebody else's narrative. The caveat to that is when you're staying in your own lane, make sure you're doing the work to be introspective. And you said it earlier in the conversation, self-aware around your pitfalls and your areas where you need improvement and growth. I'm not saying compare it to other people, compare it to yourself. Like, where are you struggling? And be honest with yourself and be able to admit to yourself that, dude, I do have a couple of shortcomings in this particular area. I should probably put some work into it. My biggest one was ego. Ego always has been my biggest stumbler.
Yeah.
And getting caught up in just struggling with that shadow. And it wasn't until I came across that concept of doing shadow work and struggling with your ego that I was able to really make some of the real pivots in my life. So I love that you said that. I'd like to switch gears if I may. Man, I love this conversation, by the way. Thank you for showing up and the honesty. The branding piece, which is stuff that I'm really near and dear to my heart. I'd like to understand, you had a lot of success early on. You were very innovative. You re-engineered the process of the fitness industry. You created all these different benchmarks that now have become like pedagogues for other people. How do you maintain your sense of balance between what you earned, that early on success, versus sustainability and remaining resilient through your future projects and your future processes?
Mhm. Yeah, that's another good question. So I don't think I've done a good job of staying balanced in whatever context that you want to apply that word. I'm really comfortable with being in this like constant state of evolution. So like I'm okay with moving forward, and I haven't written, so I co-authored 5 books and I haven't written one in more than 10 years. And it's so like
I've
to me,
written zero, so don't worry about it.
my point is those I'm okay with moving on and leaving things in the review. And again, sometimes to my own detriment. There are things where I probably should get more mileage out of them, and I haven't in the past. Um, but I'm just two eyes on the future and always thinking about like where I'm going next. Yeah, I'm just very comfortable moving forward and constantly trying to maintain an image of the things that I may have done.
Mm.
And I think for someone who's in branding, you're probably looking at scratching your head, man, like, man, you're missing so much opportunity, or there's such a better way. And hopefully, if there is, you're going to tell me that. But
Well, I don't know that there isn't. I don't know from my purview and just in this conversation with you, your humility, by the way, is really impressive. And the fact that you are self-aware that there are possible shortcomings in what you've done, and you talk about that regularly. So kudos to you. I don't think a lot of people possess that. But my question on that rear view mirror, is there ever a deviation from that where the past can help serve your present and your future?
oh, for sure,
Mm-hmm.
I wish I was better at doing it.
Mm-hmm.
But so for somebody listening, absolutely, that's the way to view it, not necessarily the way that I have viewed it.
Mm.
I went through some burnout stuff up until probably about a year ago ish. And it took a few years. And in the last year, I've had to go back and start to pull together the personal brand stuff. So previously, like I didn't know personal brand work. It was all, we built all of the companies around their own brand. And I was very intentional to a point where I'm sure I pissed off the marketing, the people that we worked with, because they're trying to get me to do stuff. Let's do a video. Let's put you in. Let people get to know you. And I'm like, nope, because that's going to be your excuse for not doing a good job of building that company brand. So I wouldn't allow it. Now I'm to a place where it's not either or, personal or company brand. It's both.
Mm-hmm.
So now I am trying to go back, and I've done some things, and there is a narrative there, but it's not as rich of a narrative as I think that it needs to be.
Mm-hmm.
And on my personal side. And so now I'm like starting to add to that and build it out further, and doing things like this, having these conversations and sharing more about my story. So that's my way of doing what you just asked about now. I think a smarter person would have not let there be such an enormous lag between when a lot of these things were happening and when they are like enriching the narrative.
Mm-hmm.
Get a lot more juice out of the squeeze if you do it, if you're timely, but that's not my way.
Yeah, and maybe you might be right about that. It's not for me to judge. I abide by the principle of Buddha is like when the student is ready, the message will arrive, and you move in that space. But the fact that you're self-aware around that now and you're recognizing the opportunities and the different platitudes that you could take this into, I think is where you stand, and it's a good opportunity for you to grow from there. That's just my take on it so far. But as with anything, you said in the beginning with the financial piece, with the business piece, having a strategy around it. So if you are going to headlong into this personal brand development, whomever you're working with, whether it's yourself or anybody, I would just highly recommend making sure you have a strategy around it. What's the end game to this, right? And then once you have an idea of where you think you can go, filling in the fleshy bit in the middle is much easier. And so there's just like, I want to build a personal brand. What does that actually mean to you? And who is it that you're trying to affect in this process of the personal brand? Ultimately, if you have the magic wand, and I could ask you, okay, by building my personal brand or building my empire or building my business or building whatever this juicy, audacious idea, who ultimately do you want to benefit from that? And who are you serving? And then understanding what that audience needs and then filling that for them based upon your core competencies, your passions, your expertise, et cetera, is like for me, that's how I figured that piece out. And I don't know if I figured it out either, but it works for me.
Yeah, I think I really like what you said. And it makes so much more sense to me today than it did 10 years ago, 5 years ago, 2 months ago. I don't know. We're still figuring all that stuff out, learning a little bit more. If we're sharp, I think we're learning a little bit more about it every day. But what you just said, like it reconciles perfectly for me now.
Mm-hmm. Would you change that trajectory? If I were to hand you the golden coffer right here and say, hey, man, all this work in between right now to get where you think you want this to go, I can erase this today and put you there tomorrow. Would you say, hey, let me just take it? Or would you want to go on that journey? I always wonder, had somebody told me all these things that I've now learned in the last 25 years of my businesses, because I never had any mentors, I didn't have any coaches, I never had any of these things early in my career, and I stumbled like a motherfucker early on. Like I failed a lot of different ways. But I'm wondering if I could have erased all of that trajectory and just gone straight to success by having somebody tell me, here's the keys to the kingdom. I'm pretty sure I still would have taken the failures, man. I'm pretty sure I would have, because in that sea of madness, I picked up so many lessons. I met so many people. I learned so many different things that like resonated with me and stuck with me. And I don't mean to sound cliche, but in the mud is where my growth really occurred. So would you change that if you were given the opportunity to just throw it all away?
No, absolutely not. I feel the same way about it that you do. That is for better or for worse at times. That's necessary, and I wouldn't change it. I don't need. I wouldn't skip any of it. I don't want to skip any of it in the future. The thing that I would do, that this was another one of those like inflection points for me, is like curating my support system, because I do think I don't want to skip any chapters, but I am cool with speeding up through them. So I want to have coaches in my ear. I want to have mentors. I want to be in peer groups. I want to be around people who are like me, who think like me, or not to get too much into the specifics about it, but right, I need to be around people who spark my mind, because that's where I gain speed. I'm still going to learn a lot of lessons the hard way, but I'm going to learn a lot of lessons through watching what other people do. I don't have to do the stupid things quite as often. If I can like skip those lessons, I'm cool with that.
Yeah, you're speaking my jam, man. You are a byproduct of the people you surround yourself with, no matter what
Yep.
anyone says. I started a mastermind group 3 years ago because of that very principle. I looked around at my circle, and I have some really good friends. I'm not denigrating this, but I looked around at my developmental circle, and I was like, when I look at my people, when I look at the people that I spend the most time with outside of my intimate relationships, my wife, my friend, like that sort of, who am I surrounding myself with that's going to make me a better businessman, going to make me a better leader, going to make me a better socially conscious individual? And I was like, dude, I'm lacking in this area. I've got just a couple people. So went out and found myself a therapist to deal with my shadows, went out and found myself a business coach to tell me what the fuck I'm doing wrong and help me guide through those things. And then I launched a mastermind which surrounded myself with a people just like you, which by the way, we should talk, bro, about the mastermind. Sounds like you might be a good fit for that. And I started filling my buckets with people that could inspire me, educate me, that I could learn from, accountability partners. So what you just said, man, that's my jam. So
Yeah.
I really appreciate that. And it's really important if you're a young entrepreneur. So we talked about, would you change its trajectory? On a scale of the most important things in your business, tell me if you agree or disagree. On the scale of the most important things when you're starting your business, would you say that surrounding yourself with with people that are going to fill your buckets, whether emotionally, whether support, whether accountability, whether wisdom, whether guidance, mentorship, I put that literally on the top of almost every element of my early business development. Would you agree or disagree?
Yeah, probably.
Yeah,
I can't think of anything right now that would clearly displace that.
yeah. And perpetual learning would be like the second, if there's anything. So I want to talk a little bit about you in your business book. You talked about the impact and the importance of storytelling and how critical it is that you're able to connect with people on a storytelling level. How do you feel? How do you feel like the social media? You talked about how you're just jumping into the space. How do you see social media evolving over the next few years and months as it pertains to people like us? We're not celebrities. You're a celebrity, you're a doctor, but people like us who don't have this huge platform, right? How important is it for us to be able to have a presence and be able to tell our story and connect with people so that they can be inspired or be educated or whatever it is that people get from social media in today's platform? And where do you see that going over the next few years?
I don't think that it's an absolute necessity, but I think that it is going to be it's going to be more prominent for people to have a personal brand than to not. I think the way that I see it going is you were just talking about it a few minutes ago about how you didn't use the word recalibrate, but that's what you were, I think you were describing how you see there's this thing that you post and it gets this response, and then you see this other thing that's just nonsense and it gets this crazy response, and you're just like, man, fuck that. This is what matters to me over here. You're recalibrating to a more sensible, practical use, right? Like those 2 likes are mean so much more to you for in several different ways than the million likes on whatever nonsense post.
Mm-hmm.
It's just going to be more of that, right? We're getting recalibrated. We're figuring out like who to find, where to find them, what we can expect out of them. I feel like you mentioned the influencers dying off or whatever like that. There's something to that trend. We're just migrating a little bit more toward an interesting thing to say that maybe we're starting to apply some critical thinking skills when we're looking at social media.
The million likes. Yeah, dude, I'll sing Kumbaya with you around the fire with that one. The million likes for the person dancing in her half scantily clad bikini doing whatever nonsensical thing she's doing are probably not the million people that I want to talk to anyway. If that's what inspires you, if that's what excites you, I'm not judging you. I'm just saying that's probably not the person that I want to be talking to anyway. I'm probably more interested in talking and finding more. That's the key. How do you find more? Those 2 people that liked your post, those 2 people that commented on your post, those 2 people that sent you a DM after what you just wrote and felt inspired by it. How do we find more of those people? That's the trick for me. And building your personal brand or building your business brand, how do you target those people more so that you're not focusing on the million people who want that? You're focusing on more of the twos and the threes that like what you said, because that's how you're going to build those relationships for me. And so that for me is like the bread and butter of social media. It's been a fantastic journey for me to watch. I joined Instagram, and again, I mentioned that was my sandbox that I play on primarily. I joined that roughly now 6 years. I've been playing pretty heavy on it. It's been really fun to watch the metamorphosis that it's taken for playing the social media game, to the stupid algorithm, to the corporatization of it, to the ad spend of it, and watching like social medias. And then we have influencers, then we have micro influencers, and it's just like life. It's the squiggly line. So you got to figure out how to play the game to some extent if you want to play in this world. And these are the people that are going to buy from you. Unless you want to go be a fucking hermit in the mountains somewhere, you got to play the game a little bit. So it's important to understand how it works and the subtleties and the nuances and the ticks, and just see it for what it is. That piece has been fun to me. I love this conversation. I could go on and on, but before I forget to plug you, I wanted to hear a little bit about your new podcast that you have. Could you tell? It's called The Business Owner's Journey. Could you share a little bit about that, and who are your guests, and what's the objective behind it?
Yeah. So it's the business owner's journey, and it's my guests are other business owners, people who've been in the trenches, who are going to willing to come and share the lessons that they've learned. And it's people who have done it, and some of them you will have heard of, some of them you will definitely not have heard of, but they're people who have something interesting and unique to a perspective that they're willing to share. And the whole idea is about shortening the learning curve for other business owners. You don't have to learn it all the hard way. Just like this is basically your way to gain access to some mentorship like insights by just listening without having to go and be in a room or be in a group. You can just do it through your podcast, soak up these lessons. You're just access to speed. It's
I love it.
exactly what we were talking about for a few minutes there earlier.
I would love to be a guest. If your people want to reach out to my people, let's get that happening.
Yep. Yeah, let's do it.
And so people can find it. Are you on all the major channels, Apple, Spotify, all the things? We'll plug it in the show when we produce the show. We'll make sure it's in the show notes as well. I want to talk about a couple of sort of hot seat, complex scenario questions, because one of the things you mentioned, the learning curve. One of the things that inspires me more than anything else is being able to have conversations with people like you. It truly enriches my life. I'm grateful that you took the time, an hour out of your day, to come sit here and share your lessons, because one of the things I love most about personal brand development and social media is that your take on life is unique, and you have a unique perspective and a unique learning curve and unique context, and you have your own failures and your own wins, and being able to share that with my audience, however small it might be, and just be able to inspire one person is the reason I podcast. So I appreciate you being here. I'm curious, as a solopreneur, you're managing some high stakes project. This is like a theoretical scenario, and you're managing this high stake project with really tight deadlines, and you encounter some really unexpected squiggly line obstacles, right? That really is going to derail the end game to this. How do you handle that? Communication with your clients, communication with your team, communication with your family for the extra hours you're going to have to work. So how does Nick Berry handle a scenario like that?
Okay. And we're saying that it's definitely there's a problem. Like
You're derailed. You planned
Gotcha.
it out. You strategized. You put everything where you thought it should be. You've engineered it. You know exactly what needs to happen. You've built a project schedule. You've built out the collaborative partners, but something comes in, man, and just fucks the whole thing up. Your deadlines you're going to miss. Your client's going to be waiting on you. You're beholden budget wise, financial wise. How does Nick Berry handle the hiccups in the squiggly line?
This is awesome. One of the things, part of my methodology for leadership growth is I have these leadership muscles, right? And there's this exercise that I take anybody that I work with through and get them set up where they do every week. You prepare for your opportunities and your intentions. And there are a couple of steps to that. The first step is stakeholder awareness. You just mentioned a few of the stakeholders, right? There's staff, there's family, there's clients, there's anybody who's affected here. I need to be aware of what's their perspective on the situation right now. And then what do I owe them or need it to be? And like, when do I So that's the stakeholder awareness. Then my intention would be like, how do I want to shape that? For me, it's going to be, and for anybody, it would be around like your values are going to be affect that. For me, I want to get out in front and I want to put everyone in a position to where they can fend for themselves uh, as needed. Depends on how significant this project is, right? But I would say if they're a stakeholder in this project, then we probably are communicating every week. So I'm going to assume that I have a meeting with them every week. I'm going to go into these meetings prepared to hand them the information that they need to know so they can adapt. And then lay out if there are changes to our ground rules. Do we need to be communicating more frequently? Do we need to roll anything else back? Yeah. Which we're going to go into more like of a battlefield type mode. If it's
like a triage.
Yeah, exactly. If that's what the situation calls for. But so the whole idea, the reason I said I love this question is because a lot of times what I've seen, what I used to do is when that happens, you're almost reactive to each instance of communication with a stakeholder. And that's not fair. And also it's shitty. You're just not good at it. But if you can prepare yourself early on, as far in advance as possible, for here's where they're at, here's the landscape of things, and here's how I want to influence this situation, then you're 10 times better off at helping yourself and helping them adapt to whatever the landscape shift has been.
I love that. It's like a proactive reactivity.
Yeah, it is.
I tell that to my daughter. She's a soccer player, and at half times of games, she would give me like, it's funny because I love the communication that humans have developed, especially with people that you're really close to, how you read each other's language. And you have these, anyway, my daughter and I she'd always look to me at halftime, Dad, how am I doing? And I was always like, you're reacting to every play. You're not being proactive about the reaction. Like you
can't
can't
anticipate.
You
can't anticipate.
You can't necessarily control what's going to happen, but you need to have the innate ability to, because if you watch a soccer match or you play chess or anything, you can see things developing before they actually happen. And so as an athlete's mind, and any athlete who's listened to this will appreciate this, if you really put yourself into the game or the project or the triage like you just described, you can, like the Matrix, read between the lines and see things as they're starting to develop and be proactive about your reaction. So I love that response. You said a couple of things, dude. You are the doctor, bro. That's your new personal brand name. You got to. Okay. We've talked about triaging. We've talked about reverse engineering. We've talked about systematizing. We've talked about being able to see the root cause of the ailment. You are the doctor, man. That's your new term.
You're going to be really proud about this.
I love that. All right. I'm going to put you on the hot suite and then I'm going to let you go about your merry way. So again, thank you for your time today. It's been a fantastic conversation. I really appreciated your response. I've written down a bevy of notes that were just nuggets of morsels that we're going to talk about when we produce this show. I have a rather cliche question, but it's one of my favorites. I always ask people just in random conversations, if you had a time machine, because I'm fascinated by time, by the way, it just boggles me that we've become enraptured in this sort of 24-hour schedule of things. Because, if you read about quantum physics and all these things, time doesn't exist, right? So how can we reshape it so that it doesn't exist in our paradigm and fuck us up all the time? All right, so you have this time machine, right? And I just finished watching Orson Welles' original Time Machine movie, brilliant movie, that you can move back into any moment in your career, whether you're first getting started, your corporate world, any moment in your time. Where in that time trajectory would you go? And what would you say to yourself in that moment?
So probably 6 or 7, 8 years ago. I don't know exactly, but not all the way back to the beginning. So it's like about halfway back-ish. And I'm not exactly sure how I would get the point across, but it's simple. You need to recognize the difference in people's willingness to do something and their ability to do something.
Ooh, I like that.
And that's it. Like that's where I feel like it would have been such a simple adjustment if I would have had that epiphany. And I feel like I let more people down than I could have done a much better job for a lot of people who are trying to grow the way that I would have done a better job for them would have been maybe not the way that they would have wanted. But recognizing when people are willing to do something, but they can't. They're not equipped to meet the expectation or the need, and you're not going to like. They're not going to want their way there. They just don't.
What my takeaway is from that, you had the opportunity to travel through time and change any specific paradigm or trajectory. And the moment you chose was how you would be able to impact other people, not yourself. That's phenomenal thinking. I really love that. Last hot seat question. I don't think a lot of people would say that. I think a lot of people would look at it, okay, I would change this, I would change that, but they will all be self-centered mistakes they would fix. I imagine
there's a self-centered angle to it, banging my head against the wall quite a bit after, but yeah, but it was not easier for them than it was for me. It sucked for them as much as it sucked for me for it to go down the path that it went down. And I could have done a better job and avoided that for both of us.
I often wonder if you could alter that specific time and space, what trajectory changes would occur? What's the ripple effect from that? I watched this really marvelous movie many years ago, Benjamin Button. Have you ever seen it? The life of, and there's like that towards the end, there's the woman who walks out of the theater production. She gets hit by, she forgets something, goes back in, then comes back out and gets hit by the car, and her entire career is ruined. Remember that scene?
Mm-hmm.
And there was a Brad Pitt is talking about like the ripple effect. And it's a really, if you've not seen the movie and you're watching the show, go watch this movie, even for just that scene. But it's a very provocative, thoughtful scene to think about the ripple effect of every action we take and what that can do for our trajectory of ourselves and other people. It's a really phenomenal thought. And I don't know that we often think about that. We're in the moment. And there was a car accident here in Charlotte where I am located, and it was fatal. There were 2 people that were killed. 2 trucks were forced to collide head on. The drivers were killed. And it happened because an individual was speeding through the freeway, texting, cut in front of one of the trucks, forced the truck to alter his trajectory, went across the freeway to the other side and smashed headlong. And all I can think about when I hear those stories is, and this dude lived, the 2 truck drivers died. This guy has to live with this now for the rest of his life. And the ripple effect that's going to have on him and everyone around him and the people that were affected by it. And everything has an impact, right? Literally everything. It just literally changes. Sorry. Last question. And if it's a good idea, I'm stealing it. So you already signed the release, so it's mine. I'm just joking. If you could design this new unconventional course, okay, because you're all about helping other people. If you could design an unconventional course for future business leaders, what would it be called? And what are the core principles or philosophies that you would teach in this course?
Interesting. I probably something. So I really like the application of frameworks and give enough space where they can learn by doing. So you and I think we've done it a couple of times in this conversation, but if we sat down and were intentional about it, we probably could list off a few things like, man, I was never taught this. Nobody talks about that thing. It's like,
that's why I do this podcast. That is why I do this podcast.
There you go. So it's that stuff. Like, I guess mine probably should be how to curate your own support system. But every entrepreneur has these gripes, and some of it's simple, right? It's, oh, I graduated high school and nobody ever talked about how to balance a checkbook. Like the shit like that, where there's probably some way that those things could be rolled up. It's not really about balancing a checkbook. It's the whole let profit first paradigm shift. Like, you need to understand the buckets that the money is going to go into and make sure that the bucket that goes to you. Yeah. Make sure that the bucket that goes to you gets equal treatment to the rest of the buckets. So creating something that enables that paradigm shift, that away from pay yourself last, you got to pay your bills first. Some of that scarcity mindset.
I love the topic of balance, and it's an interesting conversation. We should explore it further, but everything in life is a balance, right? Radical dispositions always lend us into trouble, but there are times for radical impositions and radical movements. But it's really important that after you do that radical movement, to find your way back into flow, right? Everyone's always talking about find balance, center yourself. Dude, every once in a while, man, you got to pick up the pitchfork, and sometimes you got to bust an ass. Like, it ain't always going to be balanced. But after you do that, then revert back to balance. So
and has to swing back.
Yeah. But every once in a while, man, harsh times call for harsh measures, and that's not always going to be in balance. So
I love a sprint.
yeah, absolutely. The best way to train, it sounds like you're an athlete. The best way to train is like not run 15 miles for 4 hours. Is go out and do wind sprints, do increments of 10-yard sprints, 20-yard sprints, 30-yard sprints, like high intensity, like really force your body out of this comfort zone of balance. That's the only way you grow. So brilliant, brilliant. Man, I really appreciate you being on the show. It's been a really cool conversation. We've talked about with Dr. Berry. We've talked about your journey. We've talked about some of your pivotal moments, things that have really shaped your success, the lessons that you've learned. You've dropped some really valuable knowledge on insights. For me, the takeaway for me in this show is that a powerful brand, whether you're a business or an individual or a personal brand, is being genuine, being consistent, being able to share your story, being able to come at it from a perspective of serving others first, as opposed to serving yourself, because in the process of serving others, you do serve yourself, right? It's the ripple effect, right? I really appreciate some of the things that you dropped. You left me a bevy of pieces that we're going to put together, and I'll ask Angelique to throw together in the production. We have all of your information. If people wanted to reach out to you right now on social media, what's the best way to find you?
I'm on LinkedIn. It's Nick Berry. I think so. The best way to find me is nickberry.info.
Nickberry.info.
Yes.
Soon to be drberry.info.
Yep. So I think we need to make an update. I think you need to take the crown of anti-guru. I think you got that today.
I don't know, man. It's been a conversation. It takes two to tango. I wouldn't have had that information without you.
I don't think that we're alone either. I think that it wouldn't be hard to pull together an army.
Yeah, man, it's those two people, right? It's those two people that liked our post. We got to find more of those two and compound those motherfuckers.
We're making it safe. It's safe for you guys to come out.
Yeah, that's right. It's time to come out of the closet. We're done. Like I literally did this post yesterday. Stop jumping on these stupid trends, man. There's no timeability to those, right? There's just no sustainability to that. They may be cool for a couple of minutes, but just get off the bandwagon and stay in your own lane. Focus on the things that you're good at. Stay the space that you work best. Work on the people that you know that are going to have the most impact on. Don't worry about what other people are doing. The grass is not always greener. There's a lot of people who change their lawn on a regular basis, and that has no fortitude. So if you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe, leave us a review. If you like Dr. Berry, you can find him on all the channels. Those will be in the notes below. Share it with your network, share it with your friends, build your own masterminds, and get people involved in helping us build a better place, better businesses. Stay tuned for more inspiring conversations with industry leaders like Dr. Berry. And if you're ready to elevate your brand and get on the show, connect with us at devotyndall.com or the brand storyteller.com. And until next time, keep innovating and telling your story. Thanks for tuning in to the Branding Laboratory. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe and leave a review. Connect with us on social media for more branding tips and insights. And remember, your story matters. Until next time, keep building and sharing your unique brand story. I'll see you soon.